politics. Joining me now is Siaka Massaquoi, and Fox News contributor, and New York State Assemblyman Jake Blumencranz. Great to see you both. All right, Jake, you've been telling us to fasten your seatbelts. We're going to see a lot of stuff here in New York that you couldn't even imagine that will shadow what's happening in Minnesota. Do you have any evidence of that?
Well, David, you can look all over the place. I think one great example of that is the Thrive program from Bill de Blasio's wife. She headed that. The city actually did an article on this back in 2021, showing the facilities empty multiple years after they were supposed to be in use.
This was, just for those who don't know, Thrive NYC was a $1 billion vanity project that Bill de Blasio set up for his wife, terribly run. It was supposed to help people with mental issues that were homeless and that needed help. Didn't have any effect as far as that goes.
Didn't have any effect.
And a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars went missing.
Exactly. And part of that money that went missing went to building 2 facilities in northern Manhattan and in the Bronx. Those facilities sat empty. They sat built and empty. Whether or not they were ever used, whether or not that money was ever accounted for, nobody knows. And no investigation has ever taken place. And I think we saw it best what Bill Ackman said, blue states, the bigger the fraud, the bigger the state, the bigger the fraud. And that's what we're seeing all over the place.
Now,
People
you don't know whether there's a federal investigation going on, but if there is, I don't imagine the AG of New York, Tish James, is going to be helpful for
well,
all
that's the reality. Is we have the best prosecutors in the world here in New York, but they are handcuffed by politicians who are looking to cover up the crimes.
But a lot of those prosecutors are biased as well.
Well, I think that at the onset of this, we saw that many of the federal intervention mechanisms we've seen show that you can still tackle this too.
All right, Siaka, it is not just Medicaid. I mean, all of the expansion of government that took place in the Biden administration should be spotlighted and should be combed over to look for corruption. One of them is HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development. They discovered, the new regime there has discovered $5 billion of questionable rental assistance, including payments to 30,000 deceased. I mean, we can pretty much say that's uncalled for. At the very least, it's waste, if not fraud.
Were they all out of California? Because I know in California we're big fans of dead people voting,
yes,
and being able to buy homes. I'm not surprised with anything that goes on, right, or what they're finding with this fraud right now. And coming from California, living there for almost 20 years, you see they just passed a bill a few years ago that would allow illegals to own a home and get a $20,000 to $50,000 grant, basically from the state, and that's the state coffers. They've opened up Medicare, Medicaid, and Medi-Cal to illegals that are there. Everything we're seeing right now, and you see the people who have been screaming the loudest to stop Doge, screaming the loudest to stop, the federal government from looking into who's getting food stamps. And now it makes a lot of sense. Who doesn't want, Trump's government to look behind the curtain, look under the hood? Because I believe when Trump said months into his presidency that we have something that will destroy the Democrats. Look around, guys. It's not just in Minneapolis. It's not just in Ohio. And to my friend's point, it's definitely not just in New York. Let's go out to Gavin State, and I guarantee that may be the white whale.
But the problem, Siaka, in New York and in California and in Illinois is that most of the opposition party, the loyal opposition, the Republicans, have left the state because it's such a business unfriendly environment. Also because in the case of Illinois and New York, it's more pleasant to live in Florida for most of those folks. But with all of the Republicans leading, who's going to lead the charge of investigating other than the federal government? I mean, there are very few people like Jake here.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you guys, and just like in California, we had such a shift. If we looked at the last election, everything shifted at least 3 to 4 points to the right. I think when people start to really feel this, and I've been watching online and different podcasters, people are upset to the point where they're starting to call for, hey, do we boycott taxes this year? I don't know if that's going to happen, but what I do know, that sentiment is alive and real, and people are getting angrier and angrier. The more it comes out with how much that you're working your butt off and it's being stolen, and then they're laughing at you at that, and then they're turning around and calling the other guy a bad guy. No, I see the more that's revealed, the more people, regardless on where you are, this is affecting those Democrats that vote Democratic as well, right? So these people have to wake up and decide, is it going to be another 24 billion lost in homelessness in California, or Are we actually going to help the people we, say that we want to help?
Yeah. Well, Jake, Mamdani notwithstanding, I mean, he's a big bump in the road of getting some real action here. But do you find that there is more of a sentiment, the more people find out about how corrupt the governments have been as a uniparty state like New York has become, that they may switch over?
There has been more of a sentiment, and there is tools we have to fight back, even in a minority in a state like New York or in a state like California.
For example?
We have the ability to call for investigations. We have the ability to introduce and pass legislation, even with the help of our colleagues. If we fight back, it's with the work of journalists like we saw in Minnesota that brought this to the level that the federal government is acting. And the action of the federal government is laudable. But taking that fight to states like New York and California will allow us to have the tools we need to fight back, and people like me can take it to the legislature. We can force it into committee, and we can pass it into law. That's what I tried to do with our stamp out fraud last year. Now with the volume and the journalists out there reporting, we could actually have the transparency we need to fight back on a bigger level.
Siaka, I want to switch to the gears a little bit to the political weaponization of our Justice Department. The president is now trying to urge prosecutors, federal prosecutors, to go after the legacy of lawfare. Some people say it's too late. People are fed up with the subject. They don't want to go backwards. They want to go forwards and just keep it. What do you think of that? Do you think the president's right or wrong in urging justice on what happened to him by lawfare?
Well, I think the president is 100% correct. And myself, being someone that fell victim to the weaponization of government just because I was a Republican, or I am a Republican, and I decided to speak out about Donald Trump and to support him in California. And what needs to happen, and this includes the fraud. We supported Republicans and Donald Trump in the 2024 election. People need to be held accountable. No more sound bites just on the Senate floor that's going to be, going around for 2 or 3 days here on Fox and other channels. People need to be indicted. They came after him. They came after me and many others for just simply being in D.C. on the 6th.
Right.
We need to see these people be held accountable, or they're going to lose support in the midterms. It's not going to be all that Civil War stuff that we see between, Team Ben or Team Candace. It's going to be, we gave you power. Sound bites are done. Arrest these people.
All right. Siaka, you speak from personal experience in all this. Thank you very much for being here. Jake, great to see you as well.